I risked everything to save a lone Apache widow trapped in a bear trap. But at dawn, her people arrived with spears, demanding I take responsibility for her. One act of kindness in the untamed 1800s changed everything: fear, trust, and honor collided in ways I never expected. Let's get started. The morning sun stretched its golden fingers across the rugged canyon, turning the rocks to amber and shadows long and twisting. I was riding along a narrow trail, the scent of dust and pine heavy in the air, when I heard a scream that made my horse startle and my heart jump. It was a sharp, desperate sound, echoing off the cliffs, carrying a fear I hadn't felt in years. I rode faster, my eyes scanning the jagged terrain, and soon I saw her. She was caught in a cruel iron trap, one of those merciless bear traps left by hunters who cared nothing for life. Her leg was bleeding, the crimson staining the dry, cracked soil beneath her. She fought against the jaws with all her strength, her fingers clawing at the metal, but it wouldn't give. I dismounted, heart pounding, and dropped to my knees beside her, my hands steady despite the sudden rush of adrenaline. "Hold still," I said softly, hoping my calm voice might reach her over the panic. She froze, eyes wide, terror mingling with disbelief. I pulled my knife from its sheath and worked the jaws open, feeling the cruel steel resist every attempt. Finally, with a harsh snap and a squeal from the springs, it gave way. She collapsed onto the dirt, shivering uncontrollably, and I quickly wrapped my coat around her shoulders. I offered water from my canteen, but she didn't speak, only clutched my arm, too wary to trust anyone. The canyon seemed impossibly silent after her cries, the wind whispering through the rocks. I looked into her eyes and saw fear, yes, but also something else, gratitude, buried under layers of caution. I helped her to her feet, supporting her as best I could, and led her toward my cabin perched near the edge of the ravine. Each step was careful. The jagged terrain offered no mercy. Night fell with startling suddenness, the sky bleeding orange and pink into dark blue. By the time we reached the cabin, stars were sparkling cold and distant. Inside, I lit the fireplace, and the crackling warmth seemed almost magical against the chill that clung to her bones. She finally spoke, a soft, almost inaudible whisper. Asking nothing, offering nothing, just existing in the strange safety I could give. I set down a bowl of water and some bread, which she accepted after a long, wary pause. I wanted to say something comforting, but words felt fragile, too small for the storm she had survived. Outside, coyotes howled, their cries a reminder that the wilderness cared nothing for our troubles. Yet inside, the fire cast shadows that danced across her face. Shadows that somehow made her seem less like a stranger and more like someone I was fated to meet. Little did I know, the dawn would bring more than gratitude asterisk. The first hours of night stretched endlessly. I kept watch by the fire, noting every flinch, every whispered breath, every tiny movement that spoke of her unease. I thought of my own childhood, growing up on these harsh lands, learning the ways of survival by trial and mistake. This woman, thrown into peril by chance and cruelty, deserved better than mere survival. I covered her with another blanket, noticing how she clutched it like it might shield her from the whole world. Our eyes met in fleeting moments, communicating more than words ever could. There was an unspoken question in hers: why would a stranger risk everything for me? I had no answer beyond the instinct that some things compassion, courage demand no justification. The night deepened, the wind carrying the distant sounds of unseen creatures. Yet within the cabin there was a fragile peace. I listened to the crackle of the fire, counting the moments until morning, each tick of the clock pressing the weight of responsibility onto my shoulders. When sleep finally took me, it was shallow, haunted by visions of what could happen if the wilderness decided it had more to take. I woke to the first hints of dawn, a pink glow brushing the cliffs. I rose quietly, expecting nothing, but the day's events would soon prove that danger and duty waited for no one. Outside, the world seemed calm, but the air carried a tension that made my pulse quicken. I helped her to a wooden chair by the fire, noticing how carefully she moved, as if anticipating betrayal at every turn. I realized then that saving her was only the beginning, that the wilderness of the 1800s had rules older than law, and that one act of kindness could ripple far beyond what the eye could see. The canyon, silent and imposing, seemed to watch us, as if aware of the shift that had taken place, and I knew instinctively that this encounter would change everything at first light. The canyon shook with the thunder of hooves, each beat reverberating through the soil as if the earth itself were warning me. I stepped outside, my heart hammering, to see a dozen Apache warriors forming a circle, their faces painted in fierce patterns of red, black, and white. Spears glinted in the pale dawn, catching the sunlight in sharp streaks. At their center rode the widow's elder brother, his posture rigid, eyes blazing with anger and authority. He dismounted, the leather of his boots scuffing against the dusty ground. "You saved her," he said, voice steady yet loaded with unspoken consequences, "but now you must take responsibility." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of my own actions press upon me. A simple act of kindness had become a binding promise in ways I hadn't imagined. The widow stood beside me, silent, her gaze unreadable, caught between fear and quiet expectation. My pulse raced. The wilderness of the 1800s had its own laws, older and harsher than any written rule, and one misstep could lead to disaster. The warriors circled closer, horses stamping impatiently, nostrils flaring in the cold morning air. I searched the woman's eyes for any clue of how she felt, but her expression gave nothing away. I had offered safety, warmth, and a brief reprieve from pain, yet now the stakes had shifted. Responsibility was no longer a choice, it was demanded, an invisible chain binding me to their customs. My hand brushed against my coat, feeling the remnants of last night's warmth and the faint smell of her hair. She flinched slightly at the touch, yet didn't pull away. I realized then that trust, even in small doses, was a fragile thing in this world. The elder brother stepped closer, raising his hand, and the circle of warriors tightened instinctively around him. "We do not forgive recklessness," he said, voice steady, echoing against the canyon walls. "Nor do we honor those who act without considering the consequences. You may have saved her, but her life now rests in your hands." My throat went dry. I wanted to speak to assure him that my intentions were pure, but words felt inadequate, fragile against the weight of expectation. The widow shifted, her fingers gripping the edge of my coat, and I felt the silent plea in her touch. It was not just about survival anymore. It was about honor, duty, and respect between worlds that barely understood each other. The warriors waited patiently, their eyes fixed on me, unyielding. The wind swept through the canyon, carrying dust and the faint scent of sagebrush, and I realized that hesitation could be dangerous. I stepped forward, speaking carefully, promising that I would care for her, that I would not falter. The brother's gaze did not waver, but a flicker of acknowledgement passed across his face. Slowly, he signaled the warriors to relax their stance. The widow looked at me then, her eyes softer, a mixture of relief, fear, and something more, something almost like hope. I knew the days ahead would be difficult. Trust had to be earned, respect had to be maintained, and the wilderness offered no second chances. But for the first time, I felt a fragile bond form between us. Fragile yet unbroken, stronger than fear, stronger than the harsh land around us. That morning, as the sun climbed higher, the canyon seemed less menacing, less indifferent. In saving her, I had unknowingly saved a part of myself as well, my courage, my capacity to act despite fear, and my understanding that every action, no matter how small, could ripple far beyond intention. Together, we walked back to the cabin, the widow beside me, her hand brushing lightly against mine, a silent pact that neither words nor circumstance could break. The Apache warriors departed after ensuring the bond was acknowledged, leaving us with the quiet, fragile peace that only dawn can bring. In that moment, I realized that acts of kindness in a harsh, untamed land were never simple. They carried consequences, challenges, and sometimes unexpected connections that would shape a lifetime. And as we entered the cabin, the warmth of the fire reflecting in her eyes, I knew that while the world outside was ruthless, the courage to care and the willingness to act could create a sanctuary stronger than any law or weapon.